RF preamplifier powered by anodic voltage. This is the documentation of the experience of a hobby project, made with the hope that it could be helpful to others. However, these videos are not intended as tutorials. They only show the development of a personal practice, which may or may not be a good one. Therefore, if you are following along, you are doing so at your own risk. When an old radio is not sensitive enough, especially because it endured some irreversible damage in the RF section, an RF preamplifier could help in boosting the received signal either from the antenna or after the typical antenna tuning front end. Inserting the preamplifier between the antenna resonance circuit and the mixer tube may be challenging or hardly possible, but that would be the ideal place because the input signal is already reduced to a relatively narrow spectrum of frequencies. This project is based on the NPN transistor 2SC2611, and the picture shows the schematic diagram, together with the map of components on a prototype board. The inductor L2 and the resistor R9 would be useful only if the output has to feed the grid of the mixer tube, which would need to be connected also to the AGC line. On the board, the yellow dots represent holes that must be drilled for making sure that no carbon traces nor short circuits occur between areas with elevated voltage differential. Resistor R1 is meant to operate as a fuse in case of excessive current draw. The circuit should draw about 4 milliamps, and the resistor R4 should be chosen, depending on the B+ voltage, in order to keep the current at about that value. The capacitor C3 has the purpose of filtering out any residue of RF from the B+ line. The inductance L1 is meant to block the RF from reaching the B+ line. The Zener diode D4 has the purpose of stabilizing the voltage to about 150 volts, regardless of the actual B+ value. The capacitors C6, C7, and C8 have the purpose of filtering the noise generated by the Zener diode while preventing also oscillations. At the base of the transistor there should be about 2.2 volts, while at the emitter there should be about 1.5 volts. Therefore, the current coming out of the emitter should be about 1.5 milliamps. The capacitor C4 with only 220 picofarads is meant to let the circuit have a better gain with higher frequencies. The diodes D1 and D2 are meant to clip any signal that has an amplitude greater than 0.7 volts, or rather 1.4 volts peak to peak. The signal available at the collector of the transistor has a relatively high impedance. Therefore, the resistor R8, the low-value capacitors C5 and C9 are meant to block any excessive output current. In place of capacitors C5 and C9, a single 100 picofarads capacitor would be perfectly effective, but two can provide better isolation between the B+ and the output. Input and output should be connected using shielded cable. This circuit works, but it is not good for being connected after the antenna resonance circuit, because the input impedance is too low and it would interfere with the tuning. Therefore, it can only be used as an antenna preamplifier, and the inductor L2 as well as the resistor R9 can be omitted.